So there's this really interesting thing happening in astrology right now, getting ready to happen, that I want to address here in this video. And I want to do a whole video just on this because it's going to be a main theme for the month of September. And when I talk about the lunar returns and just the overview of what's going to be happening for September, I'm going to make reference to this specifically, but I'm not going to get in depth as in what it means. So this video is designed specifically for the astrology lover, the one who is curious to understand how it works and exactly which players are at play during specific alignments. So this is kind of a preparation, I guess you could say, for the overview of the month of September so that you can understand more in depth what this particular alignment means and how it may play out in your life. So this specific alignment that I'm referring to is the conjunction of Black Moon Lilith and Neptune. Now, Neptune is in Pisces, we all know that, and the Black Moon Lilith is, and not to mistaken for the asteroid, I know there's different names and different Liliths and different, this is the Black Moon Lilith, the point in the sky that points to the farthest point of orbit of the moon, okay? The farthest point between the moon and the earth. That point is called the Black Moon Lilith. And I'm not going to get too in depth here of what Black Moon Lilith means. The classroom that we have, and the link is below, is for that. I will be posting extra information on Black Moon Lilith in the classroom. But for now, what we want to talk about is the fact that the Black Moon Lilith and Neptune are coming closer and closer together. And this is already starting to take place as we close the month of August. And it will continue throughout the month of September, of course, only getting closer. Now, there are several different facets to this that intrigue me, and I want to bring out here for you to also be aware of. But first, let's talk about just a general overview of what this conjunction, why it's so interesting to me. So, we all know that, well, most of us know that in astrology, Neptune is really a planet of ultimately the most transcendent forms of spirituality, okay? All the planets have the both polarities and the in-between, okay? So one polarity of Neptune is really the highest forms of unconditional love, creative thinking, creative realms. It's spirituality at its zenith, okay? And I mean at its zenith because it's just way above and beyond names, titles, you name it. It's just above beyond labels. As I said in one of my videos, I love this expression. Neptune cuts the middleman and just goes straight to God. So it cuts the name of the books and the name of the teachers and the churches, and it's just transcendent and straight direct to source. For that reason, you know, Neptune is a very special planet to me in my personal experience with it, and I personally love Neptune. But on the other hand, because Neptune excels at the realms of spirit, what happens to the realms of non-spirit? The linear realms, the traditional realms, it just doesn't even understand. It's like water and oil trying to mix. So in the other polarity of Neptune, we have a more blurry expression and experience. Okay, so for example, let's say let's give an example of Mercury and Neptune together. Okay, we have the combination of Mercury, which is the mind, communication, and so forth, together with Neptune. Well, depending on the person, depending on the cycle they're in, this person can experience the realms of the mind and of speech in a very, 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 very heightened spiritual way. Very, very creative and so forth, all those things I talked about. But on the other hand, depending on the person and depending on the cycle they're in, this can be a time of rather just a lot of confusing experiences and expressions of the mind and of the speech, especially when you're trying to use it in a more linear and conventional way. So for example, for, you know, exams and tests and the likes and all, you know, just a lot of analytical work, Mercury and Neptune, that's not the best pairing. Now, if you're going to give a speech about spirituality, or if you're going to conduct a retreat or a yoga, you know, class or something like that, this is amazing. It's fantastic. So it really just depends on who you are, what you're trying to accomplish at that time, and thus this is how Neptune, generally speaking, expresses itself, okay, in combination with other planets. Now, Neptune is also, let's remember that Neptune can definitely add a lot of the confusion in the mix. So for example, when we're talking about Venus, you know, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about matters of the heart. And when you pair Neptune together, for example, with Venus, you have the same, pretty much the same combination, either really powerful connections with spirituality or spiritual relationships or things like that, or you can also have a confusion in regard to that, sort of a time where you can't make up your mind, things are blurry. And the reason why I'm explaining this a little more in depth is because all of the personal planets and the sun and the moon, they're all going to be having a really interesting conversation with Neptune. And this is going to, this factor of spirituality versus, you know, uncertainty and the blurring of the lines and the hazy realms is going to come into play this next month for many of us. Now, the fact that Black Moon Lilith, and before we talk about, I'm going to continue a little bit more about how the planets are going to come into play with that, but let's, now that we have a little bit of an understanding about Neptune, let's understand a little bit about Black Moon Lilith and the conjunction with Neptune that it's about to make. Well, this is interesting because the Black Moon Lilith, and again, I'm going to go more in depth about Black Moon Lilith, about Black Moon Lilith in the classroom, okay? So if you're not a part of the classroom, just send a request to join and I will check it as soon as I can and click on the yes, okay? But overall, Black Moon Lilith is a really, really fascinating piece in astrology to work with, because the Black Moon Lilith is quite literally the obscure side of our emotional nature. And it doesn't necessarily have to be dark, even though it is for most of the time, just because of the general distortion and programming that we've been subjected to or a part of. And so the Black Moon Lilith, it does bring an element of the unseen part of our emotional nature, which can tend to be distorted and suppressed for the most part. So Black Moon Lilith is very sexual in nature. I actually do have a whole video on the Black Moon Lilith here on YouTube, and it's a pretty old video, about a year and a half, but there's some good information in there. That's more in reference to Black Moon Lilith in a natal chart. But I will go more in depth in the classroom about the transiting Black Moon Lilith. So the Black Moon Lilith is getting closer and closer and closer to Neptune. And the Black Moon Lilith at its highest expression, okay, on one end of the spectrum, here we have the unabashed, untamed, wild expression of the feminine nature. Why feminine? Because we're talking about the counterpart of the moon, the dark side of the moon, okay? Moon is feminine, so the suppressed side of our emotions. And this is very feminine in nature, okay, for its own reasons, and you can check out the video and so forth. It's very sexual in nature as well, and it operates very much like Pluto in the sense that it's black or white and it's intense. Whatever it brings strong. Generally speaking, the Black Moon Lilith tends to be a little more hidden. So it's one of those things that, like, when you meet someone, unless they have a very prominent Black Moon Lilith, you don't necessarily see it at face value, okay? But in this case, the Black Moon Lilith is about to become kind of prominent and under the spotlight in astrology. And I've personally seen Black Moon Lilith in action, okay, in transits, solar returns, lunar returns, and so forth, in really interesting ways, including death, okay, including death. Now, in its positive polarity, like we were saying, it's that expression of the voice of the feminine that has been suppressed for very long. So here we have all the sexual themes that are considered taboo. As a matter of fact, anything that's considered taboo, kind of like Pluto. So here we have anything that has to do with addiction, with suicide, with death, with anything that is considered morbid or taboo or just like, let's keep it hush hush. That's Black Moon Lilith. And at its highest expression, you are able to explore that and channel that consciously in a healthy way. Because we all have these parts, right, that are to some extent suppressed. So, getting in touch with that and expressing it in a healthy way, perhaps even through helping others with it, can be very healing, very healing. So what happens is that we have this element of Black Moon Lilith, okay, coming closer and closer with Neptune. And the combinations here for both of these can definitely, there can be many, okay? But let's put it this way, this combination at its highest expression, we're talking about some serious spiritual breakthroughs. Especially because we know that Neptune has been and will continue to be in a trine with the North Node. So we know that for better or worse, whatever happens in this month of September, however it is that they express themselves, it's aligned with the soul direction. And so we gotta trust. There are many of us that have been preparing and that are very much in alignment with the spiritual unfoldings of 2019. And for those of you who are experiencing that, and especially if your personal alignments are conversing with this in a very specific way, which means you're going to feel it, in other words, just a fancy way of saying that you're going to feel it more than others. If certain components are in place, there is such a powerful chance here for many of us to have some significant breakthroughs, okay? There can also be the opportunity for many people in the planet to start coming out of the spiritual closet. And just coming out of the closet in general as well, okay? I've seen Black Moon Lilith at play many times in charts of people that are, sexually speaking, coming out of the closet. But any form of coming out of the closet is, when Black Moon Lilith is prominent, is possible. Now, the reason why I say that in this scenario, there's going to be a lot of hidden things coming out of the closet. And this is not just in reference to the spiritual aspect, okay? We're going to put that part on hold, but in general, there's going to be a lot of things coming out of the closet. And this is because of Jupiter. And Jupiter has been and will continue to be, okay, in a square with Neptune. It's having a conversation with Neptune. I'm going to get more into that later. But for now, I just want you to know that Jupiter at play, especially with a square, square is like action, right? Jupiter at play with this combination, it's going to bring things out in the open in a big way. So don't worry, I'm still sticking here with Neptune and Black Moon Lilith. We're going to talk about how Jupiter's at play with all of this, and then I want to talk about how the personal planets and the upcoming new moon as well that we're having, this is all going to begin having a conversation with all of it. But for now, we're still in Neptune and Black Moon Lilith. So we have this interesting alignment that is getting ready now to take place. And this is very intriguing to me as an astrologer, just because of what both of them represent and the fact that they're both coming together. It's like you're pairing two ingredients, and you kind of just like, you have an idea of what it could be, but you're not really sure how it's going to taste, right? It's like, so for me, it's very intriguing, okay? But because Black Moon Lilith is also, I've also seen Black Moon Lilith associated with death, and I've also seen Neptune associated with death, especially when like the causes are uncertain, unknown, when it's related to water as well, okay? Neptune signifies, rules water, bodies of water, oil, petroleum, and yes, someone asked me the other day if that could possibly be something in the stock market, or some. I know many of you have investments in, I'm not going to get too in depth here about this, but there are some investments and things in relationship to money and oil and all that. And yes, it is a possibility depending on your chart and so forth. But there are many things that this Black Moon Lilith and Neptune could represent. And because of the kind of dark and morbid nature of Black Moon Lilith and the things that Neptune signifies, okay, and Neptune is also addiction, especially when it has to do with like alcohol, because of the, water factor with Neptune. There are many different scenarios here that we could be looking at depending on the individual chart, and also for the world collectively. So they're coming closer and closer together. All right, we got that out of the way. Now, let's remember that Neptune and Jupiter have been in a conversation together for a long time, okay, for pretty much most of the year, and will continue to be. And I've talked extensively about this square. I have a whole video on Jupiter, on this square for 2019. It's under the playlist of the 2019 transits. I think that's what it's called. It's a 4-part series video where I talk about the main transits of 2019. I dedicate a whole video for this square. I'm not going to get too in depth in it, but one of the factors that I really strongly feel with this square, of one of the potentials, is disclosure. Especially with Black Moon Lilith coming into play now because of the whole hidden coming out in the open, all right? The square between Jupiter and Neptune together, for its own reasons, which you yourself can investigate in my other video and other places on the internet, has a lot to do also with media hype, sensationalism, things coming out in the open, especially when it has to do with religion, with faith, with, for example, the John of God scenario is a perfect example. This religion factor is also tied in with Jupiter and Neptune. They both are really good for representing organizations, religious organizations, okay? And also media. And then what happens when Jupiter and Neptune come together, especially in a square, regardless of what's happening, is that we have what I've been calling a crisis in beliefs, in faith. And then when you pair all these things together with the, the chance of media, of belief, of faith, a crushing of faith and beliefs, and all these things that we've already been experiencing in 2019, asking ourselves many questions, thanks to the square between Neptune and Jupiter. Well, right now, this square is about to become active. So think of astrology alignments kind of like volcanoes, where they're there, and they may have, mild eruptions here or there, but at certain times of the year, boom, something gets triggered and that volcano comes into full life, into full action. That's what happens with astrology. Just because there is an alignment, a square, a configuration, and so forth, it doesn't mean that you're going to feel it right away or that month or even at all. Usually, those alignments, they wait for triggers, specific triggers that set it into action. And I guess it's safe to say that the month of September is bringing some of those triggers. One of them is because of the Black Moon Lilith factor. Black Moon Lilith coming together with Neptune is bringing that morbid, dark, hidden, now ready to come out in the open, perhaps shady, perhaps liberating aspect into the equation. Okay? And then we have that already existing square between Jupiter and Neptune, and what's the potential here? Boom, a time bomb, something about to be released. Something within those realms of the things I talked about. Now, I wish that I could just sit here and spoon feed you and say, look, 1, 2, 3, this is what's going to happen. But actually, I don't wish, because I think it limits our ability to use our brain and to think for ourselves. But it's like astrology isn't that simple. And it just depends on so many factors. We have the scenario for the world. We have individual scenarios, which we're going to be experiencing together. So this is why my intention with this video is really to talk about all the different options here of these combinations, or at least some of the main ones, so that you, astrology lover, can not only learn more about astrology and how it works, but that you can also look at your own chart and start to have a better idea of what it could be bringing for your month of September. When I cover the lunar signs and just the general overview for September, and when I add the other different components, it'll be easier to put the pieces together. But this video is very important if you're really wanting to take astrology a step further and understand the beauty and intricacy of how this works. So the final thing I want to say here is that we're beginning now Virgo season. And Virgo is the sign that is exactly opposite of Pisces, which is where Neptune and Black Moon Lilith are at play. So remember how I talked about specific triggers coming and setting things into life? Okay, Black Moon Lilith is one, coming closer and closer with Neptune. Jupiter's already here doing its thing, okay? Jupiter just stationed, by the way, so station retrograde, totally ready to rock and roll. Whatever the script is, Jupiter's ready. And now we're going to have a second trigger point. We're going to have one after the other of the planets in Virgo. Boom, 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 boom. Creating an opposition with this Pisces combination here that we talked about. And then naturally, of course, it will create a T-square with Jupiter up here, okay? So imagine Jupiter being the focal point. And yes, you definitely want to know where Jupiter is in your chart. I mean, transiting Jupiter right now around 14 Sag. You want to know where 14 Sag in your chart. That's a big focal point for the interaction between this polarity here, Pisces and Virgo. And then you can also go a step further and look at Gemini, which is the other polarity of Sagittarius. Okay? So if you have anything there in the whereabouts of 10 to 20 of Gemini, that could also be a point of focus for you. And even more so because it's going to create a grand cross, what we call grand cross. So not meaning to get too overly complicated here, but just letting you know that this is going to be a hot, hot, hot interaction, alignment. And basically with the personal planets, Venus is the first one, by the way, okay, that's going to create this opposition right as we end the month. And of course, also the new moon is going to be featuring this perfect opposition between Venus and this Pisces stellium. It's not a stellium, it's the combination. So here we have the element of uncertainty with heart matters, relationships, and so forth, or the potential for it. But I'm going to get more in depth about what this could mean when we talk about the overview for September. But this is already going to start setting into motion the T-square and the conversation between things coming out in the open, potential secrets coming out in the open, parts of our nature that has been suppressed and are ready to be released. Now, some people are probably not going to release that in the easiest of ways. Maybe you yourself will experience it as just some really intense, dark awarenesses, but maybe not. Maybe you're just going to be experiencing it as something within you that you've been working on to heal or to just come to terms with, that is finally going to be expressed with the voice of truth, and just in ways that are going to liberate you in very powerful ways. Like I said as well, this is going to be an opportunity for many people to come out of the closet, right? Especially when it has to do with like spiritual things or sharing things about their background or their story, and even helping others through it. Okay, this is going to be a really, really wonderful thing to witness. But globally speaking, there is a really interesting potential here for some perhaps disclosure, for things to start coming out in the open in a new way, in a bigger way. Yes, there can be some, financial, especially after Saturn stations direct, okay, more from the end of the year on. But yes, this combination could spike some investment related to petroleum, or you guys know what I mean. It could bring that about as well. We also have to just keep an eye out because, like I said, Neptune also symbolizes water. It can bring about death. It can bring about just situations that are uncertain as far as death goes, or just some shady things. When we're dealing with Venus here on a personal level, it's good to be careful with not getting into anything shady. Okay, because remember, especially the lunar returns are going to be carrying this energy for the entire month. So when we have Venus at play, Mercury at play, we want to be careful not to get involved into shady things that could bring us trouble later. But more than anything, I see this more as an opportunity for things to just start coming out in the open. So if you're already in a shady relationship or a shady partnership, or you hired someone to do a job or whatever, and things have been sort of like iffy, maybe September is a time where you're both going to sit down and have that heart-to-heart talk and just really get things out on the table. So all these potentials of things coming out in the open, and they essentially stem from the part of us that has been suppressed, an emotional aspect of us that has been suppressed, that is finally ready to find a healthy expression, a liberated awareness through the voice, through the body, okay? And let's remember that Black Moon Lilith is very sexual in nature as well. So I will leave it at that for now. And I think that we've had a really, really in-depth talk here about this Neptune and Black Moon Lilith conjunction that will be taking place very, very shortly. So now when you watch the overview of the month of September and you listen to my sporadic classes on my classroom about Black Moon Lilith, you're going to have a better understanding of what it means and how to work with it in your chart. Because now with this understanding, you know the different combinations, and you know the context of your life, whatever you're experiencing, and you know what the highest potential and probability could be based on some of the things that I shared. And that's always a helpful thing to do, okay? That's always so powerful to see it in your chart and be able to decipher it on your own, as opposed to having someone else tell you how it's going to happen. And not only that, but you can also help advise others in this, because this coming month and then Scorpio season, I think that's when we're really going to start to really feel the impact of this Black Moon Lilith and Neptune. And even though, these same alignments, the Virgo season isn't going to be there and all that, remember that we are preparing for it now. This is the preparation for it. So yeah, I think that is what I had to share on it. Let me see here. There was one more thing, but I don't remember it now, so we'll leave it at that. And I am going to finish my breakfast here in this beautiful vegan restaurant that I'm in. And If you have any questions or comments about this, leave it in the comments below, because I personally am very interested in anything that has to do with Black Moon Lilith, and especially this conjunction that is going to happen. So keep your eye out, see it in your own life, how this may unfold, because this is going to be an interesting one to keep an eye out on, okay? And then let me know how that plays out for you, okay? All right, bye-bye. See you guys next time.